because this is such a high-stakes election, you've got President Biden, his two predecessors, throwing all of their weight behind the candidates in this year's midterms.
You know, they've been rallying voters in key states, barnstorming, if you will, and those are the states that will likely decide who controls Congress. For more on this, I want to bring in another mega expert, Steven Portnoy. He is CBS News Radio White House correspondent. Steven, I mean, President Biden, former President Obama were both, as I said, barnstorming this weekend, appearing together for the first time in a long time in Philadelphia. But, you know, it's almost, and I've heard some experts say that if you follow where Obama goes, that tells you who is in trouble. But when it comes to President Biden, what kind of impact does his showing up have on, you know, the outcome and voters' preferences, given his low approval rating at the time?
Well, talking about his low approval rating, that may play a factor into the travel decisions that this White House has made. Look, the president's approval rating is right now in the low to mid 40s, depending on the survey. His disapproval rating is in the low to mid or even high 50s. And so generally speaking, most people in the country disapprove of the president's job performance. Republicans have tried to hit this point in their messaging on inflation, on crime, on immigration. The Democrats' closing message in the last days has mainly been focused on the Republicans. The president puts it this way, that this election is not a referendum on his performance, but rather a choice for the country. As the country weighs that choice, what Democrats are arguing is that right now democracy is imperiled, with more than 300 people on the ballot for the Republicans who have expressed doubts about the 2020 election. They're talking about all the accomplishments of this president and what Republicans would do if they had control to undo some of those accomplishments. And in particular, they're talking about the possibility that Republicans would try to pass a national abortion ban, which over the weekend President Biden said he would veto. Some of the closing arguments made by the Democrats in the last days.
And on the flip side, you had former President Trump campaigning for candidates in Pennsylvania and Florida this weekend. He even coined a new phrase for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, calling him Ron DeSanctimonious. Doesn't really roll off the tongue. And you even had conservative, controversial commentator Ben Shapiro saying, well, that's a very curious strategy for the former president when this needs to be about Republican unity. So what factor does Trump play here, and how much does his potential run for president influence what voters will and won't do?
Well, I think for Democrats, the former president is a motivating factor. Look what the current president has tried to do. He's tried to draw attention to what he calls the mega MAGA Republicans, the extreme MAGA Republicans, motivated by the former president and what you could call Trumpism. And so for Democrats, I think they see the former president as a motivator for their voters. For Republicans, it's interesting. As the former president was down in Miami yesterday, he noted that he believed that Ron DeSantis will win re-election in Florida, where he's favored to win in the governor's race. So look, I think that Democrats are trying to draw attention to the former president and his fellow travelers as they make this closing argument to the country that Republicans would imperil democracy. On the opposite side, Republicans are very much of the mind that Donald Trump is a motivator for their base as well, and that's why you've seen a number of Republican candidates tie themselves directly to the former president.
It's interesting that former President Trump is taking the opportunity to perhaps start campaigning already.
Without a doubt.
And, of course, start using those names. But I want to move on to a topic that was so popular in the summer that you just brought up. Vice President Kamala Harris sat down with our colleagues at BET News for a conversation about reproductive rights. That's airing tonight. BET is owned by Paramount, CBS News' parent company. But I want to play some of what she said, and then we can discuss more.
When we are talking about these kinds of attacks on right to privacy, right, it comes from a belief that there are certain things that an individual should be able to decide for themselves. I think of these issues as the issues that relate to heart and home, that your government should not be making those decisions for you.
Stephen, I mean, this was a big conversation. Perhaps it slowed down given the state of the economy, but how much is it a factor in the midterms right now? We know that states like California and Michigan actually have abortion rights on their ballot. Tell us, where do you see it?
Well, look, Democrats want to use the issue to motivate their base. Shouldn't be any doubt about this. The idea that we saw in Kansas over the summer, a referendum where voters, including in areas where Donald Trump won in that state, voters rejected a referendum that was seen to restrict abortion rights. And so you see it on the map there. States like Michigan, Vermont, Montana, California, and Kentucky, where voters will be asked to decide whether to codify the right to an abortion in their state's constitution or say the opposite, that their state's constitution does not provide a right to abortion. And I think for Democrats, they're hoping that this will energize younger voters, in particular, young single women voters. That's going to be key to their chances to hold control of the Senate, hold control of state houses, and possibly hold control of the House.
Steven, thank you so much. We'll stay tuned to your reporting.
Thanks, Steven.